are going to discuss workplace wellness. Some research being done here at UAB, why it matters, and what you can do to take better care of yourself. We have with us Dr. Tami Long, Director of the UAB Employee Assistance and Counseling Center, Dr. Laurence Boitet with UAB Medicine Office of Wellness, and of course, Salaam Green, certified listening poet and one of our wonderful AIM artists in residence. So at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Boitet.
Hello, let me share my screen. So thanks, Kimberly and everyone, for inviting me to be here. I'm really excited to learn with you guys and from you guys over the next hour or so. Kimberly asked me to give a little introduction of myself, so I'll just breeze through it. I'm a UGA graduate. Go Dogs, except for not really, because I don't really care about football very much. But there I got a bachelor's of science and microbiology, and I minored in French. It was also until I took this picture that I realized how short I was. So after undergraduate school, I went on to the CDC, where I was a microbiology fellow in the enteric diseases laboratory branch. I surveyed E. coli and Shigella outbreaks all over the world, and it was a really amazing experience, which drove me to apply to graduate school. In graduate school, I focused on biochemistry through the lens of acute kidney injury. I looked at how acute kidney injury progressed to chronic kidney disease, which was really great and really fun, sparked my curiosity. Research has always been quite the passion of mine. I graduated in 2019 with my PhD in cell biology, and then started a postdoc in a division in nephrology. And here, relevant to wellness, is where I started kind of thinking about what I was doing versus what I felt I should be doing. I had a lot of fun in biomedical research, but kind of the deeper I got into it, the more I started to realize that my passions and my purposes were not really aligning. I gained a lot of great skills in biomedical research, but I really felt like my goals were publishing papers to get grants and not trying to help people necessarily. I've always been a big advocate for mental health, and so shift happens. I got to have a rebirth in my postdoc training plan, where I joined the efforts of the UAB Medicine Office of Wellness, where I could focus on wellness and helping people be the best they can be in the place where they work. So that's where I am now, and passion's aligning with purpose, and I'm able to just live my best life over here. So I want to talk a little bit about stress, burnout, and resilience and what those actually mean. So if you look in the Oxford Dictionary, stress is a state of mental or emotional strain or tension resulting from adverse or demanding circumstances. If I'm able to get on my little soapbox for a couple seconds, I think we've lost the true meaning of stress. I want you, and I challenge you, to look at stress through a positive lens. So I'm going to reject this and introduce stress as a new idea. We're going to think about stress as good stress, or eustress, or a state of forced growth that's going to result in feelings of energy and excitement. So we're going to reframe how we think about stress and think about bad stress in the light of burnout and distress. So that is what we're calling stress these days, a state characterized by emotional exhaustion, low self-efficacy, and the depersonalization of others. So stress is good. We're being challenged. We're energized. Distress is bad. We're unable to focus and unable to thrive in our workplace. And with these things go hand in hand in resilience. And we'll talk a little bit about resilience coming up shortly. But this is the process of adapting well to the face of adversity, trauma, tragedy, or significant sources of distress. But I also want you to think about resilience as a process to harness resources where you can sustain your well-being. So keep those in mind as we continue to chat. So I'm a researcher, so we're going to talk about some maybe boring things, but I really want you guys to grasp this idea where in 1908, these psychologists, Robert Yerkes and John Dotson, developed this human performance and stress curve. So they actually used mild electrical shocks in rats to motivate them to complete a maze. But they found that when the shocks became too strong, the rats would scurry around in random directions trying to escape. So this demonstrated that increasing stress and arousal levels to a certain point could help them focus and motivate their attention on a task at hand. not super relevant to the workplace unless you're actually getting shocked, but maybe sometimes it feels like you're getting shocked in your workplace. But this really goes to show you that there's this optimal performance level of stress, where if you fall to one end of it, you're in this calm state where you're bored and you're seeking self-improvement. And when you fall to the other side of that stress curve, you have distress, that burnout, fatigue, and exhaustion. So you can kind of think of this as like when you're taking an exam, if you're a trainee in the room. An optimal level of stress is going to help you focus on the test and remember the information that you studied. But too much test anxiety is going to impair your ability to recall information. So when we talk about this optimal state, that's when your well-being is in balance between your resource pool and your challenges faced. So your resources and challenges are going to affect your equilibrium, and it'll tip that seesaw from side to side. So each time you meet a challenge, your system of challenges and resources will come into this state of imbalance. And then you're forced to adapt your resources to meet that challenge. So from an occupational stress, occupational organizational research lens, we can think about this through the jobs, demands, resources model. So in this model, it suggests that strain is in response to an imbalance between the demands on the individual and the actual resources that you have to deal with those demands. And that burnout occurs when you have high demands and low resources. But your desired state, or the state of work engagement, is when your demands are high, but your resources are also high. And this is a really important point to make, because I'm not necessarily suggesting that you lessen your demands, but rather match high demands with the resources necessary to observe that optimal work engagement state. And as promised, some science for you. So there's actually a physiological stress response to this. And this is what I like to tell my biomedical researcher friends, where, it's well-being is science. You have your hippocampus and your amygdala, and that's limbic brain structures that process your experiences by interfacing with the lower vegetative brain areas like your hypothalamus and your brainstem, and also your higher cortical areas like this prefrontal cortex. So they help to interpret on the basis of your current and past experience whether an event is going to be threatening or distressful, and that will influence your allostatic responses, so how your body is going to return to that homeostasis or baseline. So being in a state of burnout or distress induces changes in pathways in your brain that actually alter the size and volume of your brain structures. So stress actually is changing your brain. So your chronic stress is going to inhibit certain feedback processes in your brain that decrease neurotrophic factors and will impair neuron growth and actually lead to neuron death. So this is very important to grasp. Working towards a state of well-being is important not only for your well-being in general, but also for your health. So just a little deeper into that. In 2015, scientists actually looked at the brains of people who had prolonged work-related stress. They're working 70 hours a week or more and exhibited lots of characteristics of stress, sleeplessness, heart palpitations, fatigue, anxiety, memory loss, reduced work capacity, all symptoms of burnout that maybe you all have experienced. And in that MRI study, they showed that occupational stress was associated with cortical thinning, so the thinning of their prefrontal cortex, and selective changes in their subcortical volumes with behavioral correlates as well. And that really supports the hypothesis that the stress-related excitotoxicity, or this distress, is an underlying mechanism in distress-related illnesses. But what does this look like in the actual workplace? So I have the privilege to survey the healthcare teams at UAB and look at what's working and what's not working. And we found last year that the top 5 correlates of distress were all work-related. So, we measure different things like wellness, well-being index, resiliency, all these different things. But again, the top 5 are all work-related. This heavy workload and long hours, increased job demands, higher frequency of moral distress in the workplace, perceived organizational support, and a lack of autonomy or work control. And in organizations, unfortunately, a lot of discussion about distress and burnout centers around individual resilience. So in our paper, we found that resilience was factor 9 out of 10 and only accounted for a teeny tiny portion of variance in our outcome. And so that really puts resilience into perspective. If we discuss that job demands resources model again, you can understand that organizations tend to focus on resources that things that focus on the resources side of that model. Resiliency training is being prescribed. Go do yoga, go journal, go think positively. And while those things are really important, and I absolutely don't discredit those practices at all, but our research really shows that the driver of distress is not an individual burden necessarily, it's organizational. So the analogy that we've used is being resilient in a stressful work environment is like wearing a rain jacket in a hurricane. Like, sure, you'll be less wet, but you're still gonna get soaked. So we urge leaders of teams and even team members within teams to talk, have this open conversation with each other, and try to lead each other into the optimization of your workplace so that individuals are allowed to be resilient. You can't have resilience if you're not allowed to practice being resilient, you see. So when we talk about burnout in the workplace, we talk about how can we reduce it. And that always makes me laugh because it's like reducing burnout is the goal, or is it like just burnout is the state of not being burned out is an ideal state of being. I'm sorry, my son got me sick. My brain isn't working. In the healthcare setting, that's essentially equivalent to saying my goal for patient care is not dead. No way, right? We're shooting for optimal evidence-based care. Just like there's a long road between optimal performance and not dead, there's a long road between burnout and flourishing. So as workers, we should not be hobbling along just barely above the burnout threshold. Martin Seligman, who's the father of positive psychology, introduced the PERMA model of flourishing back in the late 90s, where people are considered flourishing when they have positive emotions in the workplace, these feelings of happiness and gratitude. They're able to be fully absorbed and engaged in their moment. And they have connectedness and community and relationships with others in the workplace. And they're part of a mission in an organization where they're working towards something that's bigger than themselves. And they have a sense of accomplishment, success, and mastery. So I know that a lot of this is like, oh, it's not your fault, it's the organization's fault. But while we're working towards organizational change, I want to leave you with some lessons that you can start to impart on an individual level. Did I freeze? Okay. That might help you reframe the idea of how you work. I love this book. It's called Essentialism. It's by Greg McKeown. If you haven't read it, you should. And I promise I don't get any money from recommending this, but I scream this book from the hilltops because it really changed my life. It was actually the first book I couldn't start my work in the UAB Office of Wellness until I read this book. It was a requirement for me to start working. So this essentialism idea dates back to ancient Greek philosophy, and it's the disciplined pursuit of less. So it postulates that as individuals, we should constantly define and redefine where we can create the most value in our lives and then find ways to execute that most effortlessly. So I boiled down the book into 4 lessons for you that I'll go through quickly. But lesson 1 is a hard learned lesson for me, that productivity is not hyperactivity. They're mistaken as synonymous in practice, but if you look at the images on the screen, you can see that around the same amount of energy is being exerted, but on the left, your energy is divided and exerted in a lot of different activities. So you're making about 1 millimeter of progress in 1 million directions. But imagine living your life as depicted on the right, where energy is given fewer activities. So studies actually show that by increasing or investing in fewer things, we actually have the satisfying experience of making significant progress in things that matter most. So it's like trying to make the decision between reading 5 books at once to try to absorb so much information quickly, or taking the time to actually read and learn from the lessons 1 book at a time. Lesson 2 is setting boundaries. Here we can distinguish between the trivial many and the vital few, because when we're trying to focus on everything that's popular all at once, right now, we end up where all of those things converge, which is this highest point of frustration. But I challenge you to ask yourself, am I doing things for the right reason? And is now the right time? And where those converge is the highest point of contribution, where you set your boundaries in a way that you're able to contribute in your workplace in a way where you give your tasks 100% effort and attention. Boundaries might be seen as constraining to some in the non-essentialist mindset, but as a newfound essentialist, you all know that in setting your limits, you're going to become limitless, and that there's freedom in boundaries, because setting boundaries and setting rules in advance eliminates that need to say no. But sometimes we do need to say no, and there's an art in that. I live by this phrase of if it isn't a heck yes, it's a heck no. And I'm not telling you to go to your boss or your colleagues and say heck no if you don't want to do something. Don't do that. I never told you to do that. You'll get fired. But instead, try to refocus that decision making process. Um, you're going to have set boundaries. If there's always that coworker who puts everything on your desk and expects you to be available 24/7, I mean, guess what? If you don't set your own boundaries and you always say yes, you'll always act according to somebody else's priorities instead of your own. So if you're a non-essentialist, you're going to avoid saying no to avoid feeling awkward or pressure to do something and say yes to almost everything. But you're going to dare to say no gracefully, not shouting at people, and firmly and resolutely, though. And you're only going to say yes to the things that matter, which is a crazy lesson because how do you even know when to say no? So I challenge you to create your non-negotiable criteria. So it'll help you better focus on what you're being charged with. So when you're seeking new opportunities, you need to ask yourself, what am I deeply passionate about? What taps my talent? And does this meet a significant need in my world or my workplace? And if you decide to say no, be graceful. Again, on the drive home, that we're not shouting no in the faces of our bosses. But you can say, this opportunity is really great, but I really feel like I don't have the bandwidth at this time to contribute to the extent that you might feel is best to fit the ask. And here's also an opportunity to invite others to the table who maybe have the time and expertise, but didn't come to the mind of the person who was asking. And always remember, if you don't prioritize your own life, someone else will. And our last lesson is progress is motivation. So you should do something every day that will inch you closer to tomorrow. So instead of trying to go all in on everything, which there's a lot of false logic in, if you try to do everything all at once, you think that you'll achieve more, but that really drives burnout, right? If you're firing on all cylinders all of the time. They say the more you reach for the stars, the harder it is to get off the ground. But if you start small and celebrate progress, you'll gain that motivation as you go. So write out your to-do list and check off things. And so don't write out like a huge project and not check it off until it's done, but write out the steps to get there. Celebrate your progress and pursue the small and simple wins that are essential, because research shows that in all forms of human motivation, the most effective form of motivation is progress. And that's because small, concrete wins creates momentum and affirms our faith in further success. So, becoming an essentialist, this pursuit of less can really change your life. I know it changed mine. You'll gain more clarity. The essential things become more important to you compared to the next thing in line. So execution of the essential will become effortless. You gain more control. You gain skills in pausing and pushing back and taking time instead of rushing in, and prioritizing your own life because you have the power to do so. And you gain more joy in that journey, focusing on what's important now, which in a way helps you live in the moment. And even the Dalai Lama said simplicity is extremely important to happiness. So with all of that really fast, I'm available if you ever need me. Here's my email, and I'm going to pass it on to Dr. Long.
Thank you so much, Laurence. So many thoughts. What's really resonating with me right now is that actually workplace stress can physically change the brain, and that's something that I haven't actually thought about before. Thank you so much. And now we're going to turn it over to Dr. Long, and she's going to give us some practical tools that we can implement.
Thank you, Kimberly. Give me one moment to share my screen. And there we go. So, guys, Dr. Boitet, that was wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing the research. And now I'm going to share some practical application. So, I'm going to talk about work-life balance. And so, let me introduce myself. I'm Tami Long. Sorry about that, guys. I'm excited about the information that Dr. Boitet just shared. But I'm director of the Employee Assistance and Counseling Center. I am a licensed professional counselor. I've been counseling now for 20 years. I'm a certified employee assistance professional, and I am also a board certified coach. And I love what we do in the world of counseling because we provide support to employees and members of their immediate households. here at UAB, and I'll share some more about that and resources later. So, work life balance is a cycle. So, you're probably asking, what do I mean by that? So, think about the fact that a lot of times when you reach milestones in your life, whether it's having a baby, getting married, graduation, you realize that, hey, I need to make an adjustment, right? And so things in my world have changed and I need to do something differently. So think of work life balance as the something that you need to assess at all times, not just when there are milestones that have come up in your life. And so I found this article in the Harvard Business Review, and the authors rather, that this is a 5 step cycle of assessing where you are with work life balance. I'm going to take you through that. So, step one is take a pause. So, guys, I want you to take a pause right now, and hopefully, you've got a piece of paper or a notebook or something by you so that you can take some notes. And let's go through this cycle together. So, I'm going to ask you some questions. So, my first question is, what's causing you stress or unbalance right now in your life? So, one, let me just add this. Whatever comes up, that's what I want you to put down. I don't want you to overthink this because usually the first answer is the right answer. So, what's causing your stress? Then I want you to answer the question, how does it affect me at work and also in my personal life? Um, as the EAP for the university, of course, we see a lot of people for work life balance or work life integration issues. And a lot of times it's tied into work and personal. So, what's affecting you? Um, what are your current priorities? And what are you sacrificing? Step two in the cycle is you've got to pay attention to your emotions. So, right now, do you feel energized? Are you happy? Are you sad? Are you feeling resentful about all the things you have on your plate? Are you feeling anxious? Um, and when do those feelings come up for you? Is it certain times during the day? And then I want you to answer the question, what do you want to do about it? So hopefully that answer is reprioritize. So in this cycle, you've got to reprioritize. And of course, once you recognize it, once you recognize that your energy has been depleted or you're upset all the time, you've got to think to yourself, what am I willing to give up? And why is change necessary? And so it goes back to Dr. Boitet's presentation about the brain and burnout. And so you don't want to get to a place where you're burned out. So if you make this assessment sooner than later, you can actually stop going to the place where you actually feel burned out. Step four in the cycle, I want you to consider the alternative. So now that you're thinking about your priorities, what components of your work or your personal life do you want to change? Think about it in terms of how much time would you prefer to spend on work, time with family, time with hobbies. Um, then thinking about your responsibilities. Is that feasible? So, for example, if you're working on a grant and your grant is due in a couple of weeks, you may have to spend more time writing on your grant versus spending time with your favorite hobby. And so just think about it in terms of, okay, I just got to do this right now. And then once my cycle or my work life shifts and I don't no longer have this deadline, then I'm going to reprioritize. And then the final step is you got to make a change, right? When you recognize that you're overwhelmed, you're not feeling your best, you're exhausted. Of course, we want you to make the changes before you get to exhaustion, but you got to make a change. So, what actions will you take? When can you start? It's important to make sure your goals are timely. And those are the first steps in making change. So, this is another tool that I sometimes use in life coaching. It's called the Wheel of Life. And so, hopefully, this will help with your assessment of things. And so, this kind of breaks things down into smaller parts for you. So, you'll notice that there's different categories here. There's about eight. And just remember that you can do this on your piece of on a piece of paper right now if you'd like, or you can Google Wheel of Life for a document that you can actually have in your possession. So the instructions are really easy for this. You're going to review each category, and then you're going to rate your work life on a scale of 0 to 10. So 0 is in the middle, right? And so what that means is I'm not doing well. I'm totally unsatisfied with my life. And 10 says things are going well. I'm functioning at my best capacity and I'm loving what I'm doing. Next, as you make your assessments, you're going to place a dot on the value. So, again, looking at the 0 to 10 scale and looking at the personal growth column. So if I'm feeling like I could do more in the area of personal growth, I'm going to place a dot somewhere in the middle of that pie chart there. And then I'm going to draw a line across it. And so in the end, you're going to have a figure that looks like the figure down there in the bottom right hand corner. And so this new perimeter of this circle represents your wheel of life. And so for a lot of us, it's kind of bumpy, it's up and down, but hopefully this will give you a good visual of the things that you need to work on in terms of work life balance. So now I'm going to give you some simple strategies. Excuse me. So, one, you got to set manageable goals. So, the key word here is manageable, right? Um, Being able to meet your priorities helps us to feel a sense of accomplishment. However, when we put too much on our plate, it has a tendency to overwhelm us. And so, just thinking about the research on work life balance, we know that the more control we have over our work and our personal lives, the less stress we get. So, that means we got to be realistic about our workloads and deadlines. So, I'll show this to you really quick. One of my strategies is to write down my three to dos for the day on a sticky note and just kind of place it on my desk. And so those are the things that I have to get done today. Of course, I have other things on my plate as well. But if I get to those, I do. But once I get these three things checked off today, I am going to be singing. It's going to be rainbows and butterflies. I'm just going to be really excited. So, next, you got to be efficient with your time. So, of course, when we procrastinate, it makes us feel anxious, overwhelmed. And so, it's best that when you've got something big on your plate to break it down into smaller parts or smaller tasks. And so, instead of multitasking, also want to recommend that you complete one task at a time before you move on to the next, right? You don't want to exert your energy into all the things. You just want to work on that one thing, right? And then once you've completed that one task, you're going to reward yourself. So you can reward yourself by getting up if you're at the hospital and going to Starbucks and getting a little treat from there or some coffee, or I don't know, even just taking a walk on one of the walking trails just to take a break to give yourself some perspective. Take 5 minutes, right? So, yes, we need to take breaks during the day. It's easy to come to work and look at your to do list and get bogged down on all the things. But you got to put some perspective between yourself and your work and everything you have going on. So small breaks are really important. Tune in. So what this means is I want you, music lovers, to tune into your favorite music at work. Believe it or not, this can help you foster concentration. It reduces stress and anxiety, and it can stimulate creativity. And so the research of music and the importance of it in our daily lives is overwhelmingly says that it lowers blood pressure and just makes us feel good, right? Also, I just want you to be mindful of your surroundings and your coworkers. So don't want to just blare it at your desk. I would encourage you to put on some headphones and give it a try. Communicate effectively. So, what does this mean? This means being honest with yourself and also being honest with your supervisor and your peers. When you have a lot on your plate, or if you need to take a moment, it's okay to say, hey, can we talk about another deadline potentially? Um, Especially if it's not a grant. If it's something that maybe you can take a few more days to complete, ask your supervisor about it. Ask your supervisor about it before you go and vent to your coworker, right? Um, Hopefully, your supervisor will understand. And going back to my comment about coworkers, yes, sometimes it helps to vent to our coworkers. However, after we vented and we're feeling better and those stress hormones have come down, go back and communicate with your supervisor. And last but not least, give yourself a break. So, I want you to practice a little self compassion for yourself and just realize that I'm human. No one's perfect. Sometimes I make mistakes. And then sometimes I've got to slow down, right? And if I slow down, I can be the best me for work and for my family. Okay. Work life balance strategies. These are kind of geared towards work. I'm sorry, geared more towards the personal, but they also can help at work. So unplug from technology. So yes, we're at our computers. We have our phones with us 24 hours a day. Okay, so supervisors, maybe we can't unplug totally, but we can put our phones down sometimes, right? Um, and so that goes back to having some boundaries around our time. Um, let's see, divide and conquer. So, this is a strategy that you can employ at work and then also at home. So, if there's several things on your to do list and there's another person or even a family member that can kind of help you get some things done, go to that person and say, hey, I've got XYZ to do. Would you be a dear and kind of help me with this? And believe it or not, a lot of times that person may or would say yes, just because one, you're letting the person know that, hey, I need some help with this. And two, especially if it's a work partner, maybe it's something that will benefit the whole group. Two, number three, don't overschedule yourself. Don't overcommit. So when you've got a lot going on, if your supervisor or a friend or a colleague, anyone says, "Hey, can you do XYZ on Friday afternoon at 2 o'clock?" Don't forget to look at your calendar. And it is okay to say no or not now. Excuse me. Lean into your support system. So don't forget to lean into your support system. That's what they're there for. So lean into friends, lean into family, lean into coworkers that can help you with those important tasks. I want to also stress the importance of staying active and being good to your body. So, of course, everyone knows that we should be exercising. We should make sure that we're getting plenty of water, getting plenty of rest. And if you're not, that's where reprioritizing comes into place. Because if you are good to your body, Your body and your mind will be good to you. And last but not least, don't forget to reach out to your EAP. If you have gone through the cycle, if you've asked yourself questions, if you have not been able to take a step back and reprioritize those things that are just out of whack with your will of life, maybe you should talk to a counselor. And so I'm going to segue into some resources. So, of course, our benefit is available to UAB Medicine, and Viva Health employees and members of the immediate household. And so we offer up to 15 sessions of free and confidential counseling with one of our licensed and master's level therapists. In addition to counseling and life coaching, we also offer monthly sessions um, or psychoeducation seminars. So we offer monthly QPR and mental health first aid. And so both of these courses are designed to help you learn to recognize warning signs of mental health or persons in crisis. We're going to teach you how to respond and then how to refer to resources. So, some additional programming includes our Hopeful Healing Chronic Illness Support Group, our SMILE Stress Management Initiative for Lifestyle Enhancement initiative that's available in LinkedIn Learning. And so we teach you skills, including mindfulness, deep breathing, how to set goals, how to identify those stress triggers in your life, and then what to do about them. AIM partners with us for the Self Care Studio offering that's available every first and third Tuesday of the month. And then we're offering in-person yoga at the EACC on Tuesdays and Thursdays at 5:25. My Strength for UAB is another great resource. We offer this app that's available on Google Play or the App Store. And so there's educational tools here to teach you about managing trauma or sleep problems, or if you've been diagnosed with bipolar disorder, or there's even a pain management toolkit. There's a lot of things available within this app to teach you um, strategies for increased mental and emotional health and well-being. Then we have the UAB Well app that was designed here at UAB, and it's for employees and students. And resources include a self care plan builder, a daily mood tracker, calming meditations, a calendar of mental health activities that are available on campus for employees and students. And again, this is available in the App Store and Google Play. We offer one at a time therapy as well. If you're not sure if you're ready to commit to therapy or counseling and you have a specific issue that you need to work on, that's where the one at a time therapy model comes into play. You can schedule an appointment and leave with resources to help you with whatever you're going through that very day. Of course, if you try the one at a time therapy, this does not mean you're not eligible for ongoing therapy should you need it. UAB Cares is our campus wide suicide prevention campaign. And of course, Cognito is going to teach you how to reach out or how to respond to a friend who's going through a crisis. It's a stimulation platform, it's self paced. And if you have not had an opportunity to check it out, please visit our UAB Cares webpage to learn more about it and other resources available on campus. And last but not least, this is our contact number. This is our website. Visit us there to learn more about what we have to offer. And then our email address is included on this slide as well. And that's all I have right now.
Thank you so much, Tami. Before we move on to Salaam, Sarah B has a quick question. Does the one at a time therapy count against the 15 sessions if you choose to go into longer term?
No, it does not.
Okay, thank you. That is good to know. Thank you so much, Tami. That was really important and useful information. And I always love to hear the importance of self-compassion, because I think a lot of us are probably pretty self-critical, and so that's important to remember. Okay, now I'm excited to welcome Salaam Green to the program, and she's going to share with us some really important arts-based work that she does to support um, employees at UAB and beyond. Salaam.
Thank you. Hello. Thank you, Kimberly, for having me. And thank you so much to Dr. Boitet and also to Dr. Long. It's just been beautiful. I'm like writing things down and trying to encapsulate all of this great information. I'm going to just talk to you very shortly a little bit about some of the practical applications of some of the wellness work as an artist in resident that we have been doing here at UAB, particularly myself, working through my domain of creative writing and listening poetry. I want to start with a poem and ask you a question. Have you taken the short way back home, back to yourself? Take the short way back home, back to yourself, and seed these words deep down into your heart. You are never alone. Look up to the sky. There are a million of stars spreading hope every night. Look up to the sky. You are never alone. Take the short way back home, back to yourself, back to yourself. I'm Salaam Green. I'm an artist in residence, certified listener poet. Also, I have a master's in education where I have done a whole lot of work around administrating programs for teachers, educators, and child development and brain development. Currently, I am a certified listener poet and expressive writing coach, as well as a wonderful artist in residence with a great team. One of the things I wanted to share with you for the last few minutes that we have together are some examples of what happens when we bring wellness into the workplace and we actually put it into play. And we actually have our staff, employees, clinicians, patients, wonderful people who are working in administration and in spaces every single day, taking part in wellness programs, wellness opportunities, whether they're individual, corporate, community, or group. One of the things that I love about the work that I do is that I get a chance to sit with people and listen. But I really believe in going beyond just listening. I believe in order for people to feel heard, they have to be witnessed. So what I call my work is witnessing. And I believe the quality of your listening determines the quality of their speaking. So I'm going to share some of the work that I have been working on through a wellness project called the Listening Poet Project. And as a listener poet, like many, during the early parts of the pandemic, I myself lost it. And honestly, found myself with, of course, losing financially, losing out on not knowing what expectations there were out there and all those wonderful things. So one of the things that I found through this project or through the work that I do was a listener poet certification program. And during that time, I said, well, maybe it'd be a great idea, in speaking to Kimberly and some of the other great administrators at the job that I have at UAB, to go through this program for 6 weeks and to actually sit with persons across the world who were sitting with people, particularly in healthcare, in the healthcare realm and the healthcare profession, and asking some questions and doing a poem. And everyone who got a chance to actually sit in those listening session spaces actually left with a custom poem. And the wonderful part about doing these listener poet sessions, of course, is the custom poem that everyone gets. But the healing is actually the listening. And the listening is actually the feeling of being heard. And feeling being heard is actually the witnessing. So the great thing that I put into play here at UAB, and also can be put into play in any spaces, I really believe, whether it's spaces in the community through the work that we do in the community. Also, some of you may not even be employees at UAB and thinking, okay, how can I do some of these things as well? Well, one of the things about the Listener Poet Sessions, of course, is we bring it to you. These are spaces where I come and I sit with you as an employee or sit with your employees. Usually I say 10 to 15 minutes, but usually it takes about an hour. People are talking, we are listening, we are witnessing. And I wanted to show this really great example. We are here in the middle of what we had in the middle of UAB. We're in the middle of North Pavilion, which is in front of where all the restaurants and food is. And we are having a very close-knit listening poet session with employees at UAB who just came down, took a chair, we sat for 20 minutes, and I asked the question, what would you want a poem about? Tell me quickly about your current situation. And everyone, I tell you, everyone that I sat with during this particular time in the middle of this open air session felt as if they were in a cocoon, or told me it really felt as if they were able to intimately and through some vulnerability be able to talk not just about what they wanted a poem about, but what their current situation was and how they wanted their current situation to be conveyed back to them. And I love the whole idea that this can happen anywhere. The thing that I get a lot is I don't have time for workplace wellness. I don't have time for someone to come in to do a workshop. I don't have time to go to counseling during the day or after school or in the evening. I don't have time for an artist or for a therapist or for someone to come in and do this work. Well, here I am in the middle of the hall on one of the units with with Nurse Rowe, and we are doing this listener poet session in the corner in front of this beautiful artwork with her. She said, I want this listener poet session. Can you come at 7:45 before I start everything for the day? Absolutely. So at 7:45, I came, and then we began to talk, and every little corner we went in, every break room we went in, every office we went in was occupied. Copy machines were everywhere. People were getting coffee. And I said, how about we just stand right here? And as we stood right there, she began to smile, and we did our 20-minute, 30-minute, and it probably was a 40-minute session. We needed to get chairs, and we sat in the middle of the department, and we began to have that listener poet session. And after we were done, she called over her staff and she said, come over here, y'all. You need to do this as well. And I had an opportunity for 10 minutes just to listen to her staff as well before they began to start the day and move into the spaces they had to move into. So my biggest thing is think about innovation and creativity in wellness. That's what we're doing. Innovation and creativity in the way that we produce, and also in the way that we are making sure that we are well and our staff is well, and that we are producing elements of areas that bring wellness into the spaces that we're in. This is a listening poet session that I had with Dr. Kennedy, who's the superhero of wellness. He's the director of wellness. So as I'm sitting here with Dr. Kennedy in UAB medicine, we are here in the cancer center. And so we were walking around trying to find a place, and I don't know what we're laughing about, but evidently Dr. Kennedy said something funny. And if you know me, I just like, okay, I have to take a moment. But we had this wonderful listening poet session where we just sat there for 30 minutes and we began to really talk about wellness. And I began to just sit with the director of wellness and ask the question, what kind of poem would you like? And then ask the question, how do you want to feel? How do you want to feel? And Dr. Kennedy went on to write this beautiful poem. And what I tell a lot of people is you're actually writing the poem as I'm listening. I actually listen, then I go back and write the poem as a poet. And then I send it back to you in a PDF and audio. But he's the wellness superhero. I usually do an origin story, and he has on this well-animated cape to boot. And he told this beautiful story about how he wanted to go against the whole mantra of resiliency that's in medicine and with physicians and with clinicians. And part of his poem that I'll share some excerpts were devotions from a professor of medicine that I wrote for him. When the world paused, we again ate from the hot stove in mother's house. Nothing savory or sweet could satisfy. We slowly walked into rooms with our white coats touching our knees, rarely stopping. We passed through tight halls, reluctantly counting our own heartbeats. So as he was answering my question about his current situation, how he wanted to feel, began to tell me a story of his life, also began to tell me this beautiful story that I put into a poem. And as I sent this audio back to him, He began to talk to me about some of the writing that he wanted to do, and began to actually talk a little bit about how the Listener Poet program can be really impactful and inducted into all of the work that we do here at UAB Arts and Medicine, but also in community practices and for folks who might not even be persons who are working at UAB Arts and Medicine. And Dr. Kennedy wrote that last week I had an opportunity to meet with Salaam for my Listener Poet session. I began the conversation. I have to move my little share things around too so I can read as well. I began the conversation by sharing our department's prior experience, in which 10 of our faculty, including 6 division directors, had sessions with poets, wellness sessions, and the organization through which she received her certification. And as our conversation evolved, Ms. Green gently guided me into talking about how the pandemic has impacted my life, both professionally and personally. He says it was a powerful experience, and he emerged with a new appreciation for how personal and professional experiences of the last 2 years have been woven together and how our responses to one event can overlap. So I have to say that it is such a gift to be a part of this program and to give away the time to hear and to listen and to see how good listening, not the poem is like an extra little beautiful gift that you get, but it's actually the listening that's the medicine. It's actually the witnessing and the being heard that's the wellness. So I also did a listening poet session for Dr. Landerfield, who is the chair of UAB Department of Medicine as well. And he began to really just talk about the whole idea of how modern medicine mirrors justice and how he wanted to really make sure that we were well, not just well through modern medicine, but well through the justice that we do on a daily basis. And so, can good listening be healing? Absolutely. As a listener poets, we hold space for people 10 to 15 minutes to share whatever's on your mind. Like I said, it can go longer than 10 to 15 minutes. And one of the first listening poet sessions that I had as a certified listener poet and expressive writing coach and facilitator was with Malcolm Marler, who is a former senior director of UAB Pastoral Care and is now the leadership support specialist for UAB Medicine. And he says that Salaam wrote a poem about my experience in the pandemic from a brief interview. It was emotionally healing and gave me an opportunity to step outside of my experience to learn important lessons going forward. I'm so grateful. And the thing I love about Malcolm's poem is that he began to tell me about how during the pandemic, he wasn't able to go into the actual hospital rooms as a chaplain. And he began to put his hand on the windows of the rooms of people. And not only did he begin to do that, but it became a community experience for wellness because he saw doctors doing that and nurses doing that and families doing that and patients doing that. And he began to see technicians doing that and custodians doing that. And as he began to see that, he began to realize that that was a way that we can bring community healing and community wellness in a space that had been sabotaged, of course, by burnout or a lack of resilience or a lack of encouragement as well. And so the question I oftentimes ask is, if you were behind those walls in that hospital room, like Malcolm, whose hand would you want on the hospital window when you were resting, when you were not well? If you are in your cubicle or in your corporate office or in the community working or in the field or with your staff, who's putting the hand on those windows for your staff, for your employees, for you? Is it something as simple as a poem in the corridor or a listening session or a writing session for your staff so that we can begin to put those hands back together again? And lastly, this is what happens when we decide that we want to take our community wellness into a corporate wellness, into a space where we are communally healing together. I totally believe that the number one way that we heal is through community. As individuals and alone, that is not going to always happen. So we did the first Juneteenth celebration here at UAB Medicine through UAB Medicine and the Office for Diversity, of Equity, and Inclusion. This was the first UAB Juneteenth event. And this is where a group of wonderful administrators decided, okay, not only do I want persons who we work with, not only do I want staff to become well and their voices to be heard, but I want a community project so that it can go worldwide, so that it can also be someplace where communal and community healing can be seen. And so UAB Health System Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, UAB Health System Believe Employee Resource, UAB Arts and Medicine, myself as an artist in resident, frontline staff workers, doctors, physicians, we all got together over maybe 2 months, did listener poet sessions, and after doing those listener poet sessions, came together to do a community response to burnout, to a community response to a lack of community, a community response to having our voices heard. And in that community response, storytelling, which changes our neurons and turns those brain cells back on to revitalization, and through that community gives a supportive space so that we can speak and be heard and witnessed. We did our first Juneteenth celebration. And in that Juneteenth celebration, these are the wonderful folks that were there smiling, all of our physicians and clinicians and artists and musicians and well-renowned folks who are doing great things every single day, had their voices heard and were witnessed as we were doing this beautiful, beautiful space. And it all came out of the listening poet sessions that we did. This is really so nice and made me smile and feel proud. Thank you for writing this. I'm looking forward to connecting during Juneteenth from Dr. Lopre. I absolutely love this. Thank you for taking my ramblings into something tangible and meaningful, Dr. Bailey. Salaam, I have listened to it several times. Each time it feels like fire in my bones. I am prayerfully seeking God on how to channel my passion to make impactful change. Valerie Jones, a seasoned administrator. Salaam, once again, she said she's listened beyond, and she's beyond pleased. That's Anissa Hatcher in patient experience. And coming soon, I wanted to share what other people are doing that you can also do as well. So I'll stop sharing my screen and I will share some of those things. And at the end, I'm going to share a poem from one of our Juneteenth persons. And I know the time is going by kind of fast, but I wanted to just share that what we will be doing, that APP, which is let me stop sharing it and come back on, which I exit my screen.
We see you, Salaam. You're back.
Okay, I'm back. Do you see this? So coming soon in September, APP is doing listening poet sessions as well. And so simply, you can do this through Grand Round. Simply, you can just contact us and do this at any time that you want to do it. Simply, it's as simple as saying, I want this for my staff. How can we make it work? When are we going to make it work? And how are we going to make it work for the people that we care for on a daily basis? So I'll end with a poem and call it a day. So this is a poem from our Juneteenth celebration. And this actually came from one of our, from Dr. Faye Williams, who told, when I spoke with her, she's like, I have 800 people, 1,000 people that I have every single day that I'm supporting, and then supporting in the work that she does and the work that she does every day. And it's called My People. My people, the people who care for the people who care for the people. My people, come and grip this faith I hold. My people, you are bold. My people, show up in my office, crowding around a small table where big voices of vulnerability find room, safety, and protection. This is how I choose to serve my people. From meaningful Mondays to thoughtful Thursdays, the people who care for the people who care for the people are making room for their healing. Say thank you to and for my people who are your people. My people are proud and resilient, people with strength, valor, and vision. Who are your people? My people are diverse in ethnicity and culture, sound in advice, and spend days and nights laboring on behalf of the ones they care diligently for, the sick and dying. My people who care for the people who care for the people, stand up and be seen. Speak up and be heard. Show up and be loved. To build much first. First, ask the people who care for the people who care for the people. Next, listen to the people. Then include the people in the decisions made for the people who care for the people. So to the people who care for the people who care for the people, stand up. Stand up and be seen. Speak up and be heard. Show up and be loved. This poem is in gratitude for the people who care for the people who care for the people. Can you hear me now? I sure hope you can. Thank you.
Salaam, thank you so much. That was beautiful. Yes, whenever I have to say also that one thing that I so appreciate about Salaam, among many things, is that whenever she speaks in one of these spaces, it's one of the first times of the day that I actually am like having a moment to slow down and just think about things, you know, from a mile high perspective, as opposed to just everything that's right in my face. And so anyway, thank you. Oh my gosh, Dr. Boitet and Dr. Long, Salaam, I'm so appreciative that you are all here today. We are gonna have to maybe do a version 2, a round 2 of this, maybe bringing some additional things into the space. But I appreciate you all, and I appreciate everybody who's been able to join us. Our next Virtual Mental Health Monday will be September 19th with a focus on addiction recovery, and we'll feature Martina Daly. She's a social worker and founder of New Awakenings Recovery Services. So we'll look forward to that. But everybody, thank you so much for being here, and have a lovely week.